Welcome in as we welcome all things people, power, and politics on Detroit's only nightly political talk show. I'm Rup Raj. This is a show you can always trust to give you unbiased political news each and every night, including unapologetically fact-checking both Republicans and Democrats thoroughly and often, honoring the truth above any candidate. And we've noticed more of you are making the Pulse a part of your day, some live on TV, others streaming it the next day. However you do it, we're glad you're with us. A lot to get to. Former President Trump back in Michigan and making some news, a pledge about a hot button issue in this year's election. We'll break that down. And speaking of hot button issues, the former president could be losing support because he's not hardline enough on abortion, who says she's telling her followers not to vote for him unless he changes his tune. But the big story tonight, Vice President Harris alongside her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, sitting down for their first interviews on TV since taking over the top of the Democratic ticket. Harris's lack of interviews has been criticized since she joined the race, but she touched on a lot of issues, including one that hits close to home for many here in Metro Detroit, the Israel-Hamas conflict.
As I said then, I say today, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. And we have got to get a deal done. We were in Doha. We have to get a deal done. This war must end. And I remain committed since I've been on October 8 to what we must do to work toward a two-state solution, where Israel is secure and in equal measure the Palestinians have security and self-determination and dignity.
Another issue that has a lot of people talking, the border. Harris blamed Trump for killing a bipartisan border bill and pledged to push for that legislation and sign it if it got to her desk should she become president. And then she faced this question from CNN's Dana Bash.
Something that you said in 2019 when you first ran, there was a debate. You raised your hand when asked whether or not the border should be decriminalized. Do you still believe that?
I believe there should be consequence. We have laws that have to be followed and enforced that address and deal with people who cross our border illegally, and there should be consequence. And let's be clear, in this race, I'm the only person who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations who traffic in guns, drugs, and human beings. I'm the only person in this race who actually served a border state as Attorney General to enforce our laws, and I would enforce our laws.
She also faced another question from Dana Bash about changing her position on fracking, now saying she does not think it should be banned, and about her policy reversals in general, and whether people could trust that the policies she pushes now are the ones that she'd have moving forward.
The most important and most significant aspect of my policy perspective and decisions is my values have not changed. You mentioned the Green New Deal. I have always believed, and I have worked on it, that the climate crisis is real, that it is an urgent matter to which we should apply metrics that include holding ourselves to deadlines around time. We did that with the Inflation Reduction Act. We have set goals for the United States of America and by extension the globe around when we should meet certain standards for reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, as an example. That value has not changed. My value around what we need to do to secure our border, that value has not changed.
We're also getting reaction from two people you know well from Let It Rip, conservative James David Dixon and Democrat Mark Lee.
I think that she did an excellent job, quite frankly. I think she did a solid job of the way she communicated, sharing her ideas. I love the fact that she was very calm, very direct. What she was doing was introducing and reintroducing herself to the American people. People know her as vice president, obviously, but this was an opportunity for her to reintroduce herself to the American public. And I think generally, overall, she did a solid job doing just that.
Kamala Harris is too boring to be president. What I saw was a woman who had the rapt attention of America and couldn't keep it. It was just like, I kept waiting for the thing to start almost. I'm looking at this beautiful woman sit there in a gray on gray outfit, not much expression on her face, none of that smile, none of that charisma that we're used to seeing. It was just bizarre. It seemed like she was trying to hide from herself.
All right, Vice President Harris is in the Peach State now. She'll be in our state on Monday, spending part of the Labor Day holiday in Detroit. We're still working to learn details about when and where this campaign event is happening, but as soon as we know, you'll know. And also tonight, we've learned President Biden will be in Michigan a week from, well, today. Mr. Biden will be here September 6th to talk about his agenda, but where specifically he'll be, that's still a mystery. Once we get the details of that, we'll let you know as well. Now, though, to the other side of our ticket, former President Donald Trump back in Michigan for the second time this week at a steel plant in Potterville. That's just west of Lansing, Michigan. Trump reiterated that abortion is an issue for the states, and he supports exceptions for rape, incest, and to protect the life of a mother. And then he made this claim.
The real problem and the real radicals on that issue are the Democrats, where you can have an abortion in the 9th month, and in 6 states, you're allowed to kill the baby after the baby is born. And you know, one of those states is Minnesota, where this tampon Tim comes from.
And you hear a lot from candidates, you hear a lot from people, but here's the truth. Here are the facts. Infanticide is illegal in every single state in America. And according to the CDC, abortions 21 weeks or later made up less than 1% of U.S. abortions in 2021. But then Trump made some news when he touched on another hot button issue in this year's election, in vitro fertilization. Here's what he had to say about that.
I'm announcing today in a major statement that under the Trump administration, your government will pay for, or your insurance company will be mandated to pay for, all costs associated with IVF treatment, fertilization for women, IVF treatment. Because we want more babies, to put it very nicely. And for this same reason, we will also allow new parents to deduct major newborn expenses from their taxes.
We'll dive more into that coming up in just a few minutes. But this was Trump's third visit to Michigan in the last 2 weeks, and the 8th this year. But Trump's stance that abortion is a state issue, and his running mate J.D. Vance's position that Trump would veto a national abortion ban, well, that puts support from a key group in jeopardy. According to Politico, Lila Rose, the leader of anti-abortion group Live Action, says she's telling her followers not to support Trump unless he takes a more hardline approach. Not only do they want a national abortion ban, but they also want restrictions on IVF. Rose told Politico, quote, "It's not the job of the pro-life movement to vote for President Trump," end quote. Well, VP Harris's husband was in West Michigan today, just days before Harris visits the state. The second gentleman speaking to supporters at a brewery in Kentwood, just south of Grand Rapids. Doug Emhoff urged voters to do what they can do to get Harris in office.
And so when people say, well, what more can we do? Well, you're in Michigan, so you got to do a lot. So, I mean, you just got to keep knocking on those doors. You got to keep going to the offices. You got to keep doing everything you've been doing here to make sure that we win this state.
You know, polls only mean so much, but just to get an idea of where the race stands as of this day, the Real Clear Politics average of polls has Harris leading by a little less than 2 points, 1.8. That's it. So it is razor thin, and it is an important state, obviously, for both parties to try to get. But we were also curious, this being the first major election since early voting became a thing. We put this poll on fox2detroit.com. Just scan the QR code right there at the bottom of your screen to weigh in. How do you plan on voting on Election Day? So far, most of you say you'll go early or vote absentee. Now we're revisiting a conversation we had last night about the impact of social media on elections. We get a lot of buzz about this. We're getting a more dominant cycle every single time, but it requires a lot of skepticism. So we're getting a pulse check from two people about how they approach it.
Don't trust anything 100% unless I can see and feel it, right? So you have to, of course, do your vetting, and you have to, of course, go to the sources. So if it's not directly from their page, then I won't believe that it's something that they've said. And it is something, and if it is something that they've said, of course, I want to do my own research to see if the facts they're putting out there is true.
Social media in general is the algorithms are built for you to spend as much time as possible on them. So it's continuously creating an echo chamber. And I think that's pervasive, in our culture today. I think it's public health crisis, frankly. I think it's tanking, mental health of our kids and adults at this point.
We always would love it if you could chime in as well if you have an important point about this. And by the way, if you want to see our full conversation about social media and its impact on elections, just head to fox2detroit.com or the Fox Local app. We're there as well. We're taking up the abortion issue next on The Pulse. A pro-life and pro-choice advocate are in the hot seat talking about the issue's impact on the 2024 vote. You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2.
A embryo statute where they recognized embryos as juridical persons since the 90s. And I mean, IVF has been alive and well in Louisiana. So
but for someone who's a conservative, who's a Republican, who's criticized Kamala Harris for saying, I can't just give away $25,000 home loans to people and expect them our country to be whole financially, to then come out days later and say, I want to pay for IVF for everybody. A lot of people who say, I don't want to pay for your kid.
No, absolutely not. And I know how expensive IVF is. And I went through infertility, and I found a doctor who doesn't do IVF and doesn't exploit people based upon their ignorance. I got pregnant the very first month.
But do you agree with President Trump on his stance that he should be providing IVF from the government to those who want it?
Absolutely not. To be paying for it? No.
Let's talk to Lori Goldman a little bit about what you've heard both Trump and Vance say a little bit about. We know where Kamala Harris stands when it comes to reproductive rights. She's talked about it for years, even as vice president. When you hear these Republican candidates, what do you think about when you hear Donald Trump say, look, this is a state issue, and we're going to keep our hands out of it?
Regarding IVF, I'm a fan of IVF, and in Michigan, our legislature voted on party lines. The Republicans didn't want IVF to be available to people, and the Democrats did, and thank God that it is. I have been a recipient of IVF. I had triplets at 48 years old after trying for 5 years to get pregnant. So I'm very thankful that it's there, and I think it's a necessary thing. Any options that people have, because not everybody can have children the old-fashioned way. And if people want to have a family, they should have options how to have that family.
So then would you agree with Trump's proposal today that he put out there saying we should be, as the government, the people here to pay for the IVF for people who want it and need it?
You know what? There are a lot of other things that I'll complain about that the government spends money on before I'll complain about that.
So in a sense, but as a Democrat from Fems for Dems, you would actually, in this case, say, not a bad option.
I probably wouldn't even say the part. Yes, that's not a bad option.
I know people who went through 5 cycles of IVF and never did get pregnant. And every time they had to make a decision as a family of how much money they were going to spend, because you can end up easily upwards of $100,000 and not get pregnant. And for the government to be funding that and not have a point where a family can say this is too costly, we're just going to keep paying for 10 cycles.
Let's talk a little bit about the issue of abortion, taking IVF off the table for a moment in reproductive rights, talking about abortion. You've heard former President Trump say this over and over again. It's the right of the state. The state needs to decide this. He also believes in exceptions that Ronald Reagan, he says, believed in as well. Do you break ways with former President Trump when it comes to his exceptions?
First of all, Ronald Reagan did not believe in the exceptions. He specifically said only in case of the life of the mother. He said that in an address, and I've shared that numerous times.
But rape and incest, you're saying former President Reagan did not believe that.
He did not.
But what about life of the mother when President Trump and Reagan both say, he said in the past that it's life of the mother that's critical. Is that a place where you would agree with former President Trump?
Yes, and this is what I wrote in my philosophical abortion essay that was ranked #1 for decades on Google. But yeah, absolutely, nobody wants to see someone die. We're all pro-life. And, I was conceived in rape. And the 14th Amendment says that no state shall deny a person equal protection. And also that, no state shall deprive a person of the right to life, liberty, or property.
Should Trump and Vance be taking a harder line to protect the unborn, in your mind?
Yeah, I think they should. But I also, kind of see what's happening right now. And I'm really good friends with Lila Rose and others who have spoken out since that particular interview. But I'm someone who also lost her 2 sons to fentanyl poisoning.
Absolutely.
And so I think that it's very critical that we, get Trump elected because of
the border issues.
The border issue and the number of people that are dying. We have almost 115,000 dying every year. The year my son was born, 20,000 drug-related deaths. And there's a war going on. And so I'm pro-life all the way around.
Yeah, when you vote on a candidate, you can't agree 100% with everything that they're saying. But I do want to say, for the record, this is not a partisan issue when someone loses their babies because of fentanyl. The border has a crisis on its hands, and leadership is needed to move the meter and do something to fix it. And that's what you're looking for. But I do want to get back to reproductive rights and Lori Goldman here for a moment. When you hear Donald Trump say that it's up to the states and that it's not going to be anything that I'll ever ban, do you trust him?
No, of course not.
Why?
I'm a thinking, breathing human being. I've been around since I started FEMS in February of 2016. We don't have enough time left in our lives for me to give you a list of things that he said that he hasn't followed through with or never believed in the first place.
But you don't think that you think he would change his stance after being in office?
He could change his stance. It could become the handmaiden's tale for all I know. I trust him with nothing. And you know what? I don't care what he says about federal, state. It's a woman's right, my body, my choice, and every woman on this earth.
Rebecca Kiesling, you've heard him talk about the Supreme Court. He's appointed Supreme Court justices that have helped shape the reproductive rights conversation in this country. If Kamala Harris is elected president, do you have fears that something could happen similarly where she could do some things to make this a problem for you?
I mean, the Supreme Court is obviously very critical, but right now in Michigan, regardless, people did vote for to amend our Constitution. I think most people didn't read everything that it said because we're looking at right up until birth, and they've repealed not only.
Laura, you're shaking your head.
It's not true. This is like such a dangerous misconception, lie, whatever it is.
I'm an attorney. I've read it. I know exactly what it says.
You're
I've
wrong.
litigated cases.
You're wrong. You might be an attorney, but you're wrong.
Don't call me a liar, really.
No,
seriously.
I didn't. I would call you a liar if I was calling you a liar. I said you're wrong.
And the reason you say that's wrong is because?
No doctor is performing an abortion when a mother comes in finishing her gestation. No, that is not happening unless there is something direly wrong with the fetus or the mother that would cause a problem medically.
And infanticide is illegal in all the
again, she
states,
says unless
right?
there's something wrong with the fetus, if there's something wrong with the baby, then they do late-term abortions. And
but infanticide is killing of a baby at that term is illegal in all the states.
No, it's not. No, it's not. And in fact, it's no.
Infanticide is illegal.
It's been decriminalized. New York decriminalized.
Killing
a
a baby
of states.
after birth is illegal.
That's not true.
In
They
America.
decriminalized it. They repealed the neonaticide law. They repealed it. Fact check me. They repealed it in a number of states, and New York was one of the first to do it.
3 or 4 times
I'm telling
already.
you. Do you understand what decriminalized means?
We do, of course do. Yeah.
Okay, that means you cannot be arrested. You will not be sent to jail.
So you're saying there's no binding criminal measures that are in place for that, and that's where your interpretation comes from.
It is not a crime anymore.
Rebecca, I want to thank you for joining us. We certainly will be taking a closer look at this issue with both sides, Lori Goldman and Rebecca Kiesling. Thank you for your time here tonight on The Pulse. We're keeping this conversation going after the break. Up next, Battleground host S.C. Cupp with a closer look at the abortion issue from a national perspective when we return. Yeah, thank you both for joining us. But it's not. Back now on The Pulse, covering everything people, power, and politics from the D to D.C. and keeping the abortion conversation going. You know, it's not as big of an issue for Michigan after abortion rights were enshrined in the state constitution 2 years ago. But here now to talk about more from a national perspective is Battleground host S.C. Cupp. You know her from the Battleground, of course. It airs right here on Fox 2, and it's always good to see you. S.C., thanks for joining us here today.
My pleasure.
So I want to talk to you about what happened today in Michigan. You heard former President Trump at that rally today basically saying, hey, as president, I want to protect your right for IVF, for in vitro fertilization. Does that come as a surprise to you at all that he would come out and say that?
It does and it doesn't. I think he is accurately reading that a majority of the country is not where some of the extreme legislation that Republicans are pushing on women's reproductive rights are. And he's been keenly aware of that since before he was president, knowing where people were on abortion. And so that part doesn't surprise me. The practicality of this offering is a little surprising. And I did a little looking on social media to see reaction to it from all sides. And there were a lot of people saying, well, gosh, this is just going to make all of our insurance rates go up now. There were also some people who said, this is great. IVF is really expensive. Also folks who said, this is great. We should be encouraging people to have more children. But on the other side, I saw a lot of conservatives saying, well, we're not for government mandates. Where did this come from? And then I also saw some Catholics saying, well, he just lost the Catholic vote because Catholics are not in support of IVF. So mixed bag all around. I'm sure he'll get some pushback, again, on the practicality of how that's actually going to work. But it's an interesting move to offer to a national audience at a time when a lot of our battleground state voters are saying that abortion is top of mind.
Yeah, Essie, this is fascinating to me because you look at the contrast of when VP Harris said, hey, look, I want to offer $25,000 home loans to people, and the package would amount to some of people's approximation more than $1.7 trillion. And people are saying, man, Democrats just want to hand out things to people, and that costs money. Here you have him saying he would either have the government or insurance companies cover the costs. It seems like he's almost borrowing from her playbook of offering things to people that they would want.
Listen, one of the critiques of Trump has long been that he does not hew to conservative policies, things that have been conservative orthodoxy for, when I was a kid, right? And so the idea that he would, offer a big government solution shouldn't really surprise people. I think it is going to, again, upset some of those conservatives who don't want big government, who don't want those mandates, and also just people who don't want to pay for other people's medical procedures. There's a lot of those. So it'll be interesting to see this parsed by all of the different factions that are looking at these policies now.
And of course, this conversation will get more robust because we have VP Harris, who I think more than any other issue, more than the border, has stood by reproductive rights as one of the big tenets of her job as VP, and also now what she hopes to be as president.
Yeah, and she's also, I think, keenly aware that a majority of Americans, a majority of voters are in the middle on this issue. They want abortion to be legal, but they also want restrictions. So I don't think we're going to see her veer off to the far left, which is sort of a more extreme position of abortions with no limitations, no restrictions. I think she's going to live right in that center. And I think what you're seeing Trump try to do is eat into that center. That's hard, though, because Republicans are already all over the map on restricting abortion rights. And the Supreme Court, as you know, banned overturned Roe v. Wade. So it's a tricky fight for those voters in the middle, but those are the exact voters that both candidates are going to need in November.
Yeah, this is so fascinating to watch. Of course, it unfold with so many weeks left in the election. This topic is going to be one of the big ones that we'll keep talking about. Essie Cupp, always good to see you. Of course, watch Essie on the Battleground that airs right after The Pulse. We're always glad to watch your show and for you to be a part of ours.
Thanks, Rube.
That is The Pulse for tonight. I'm Rube Raj. We'll see you tomorrow night.